Today our meetup will be in English, so switch to English from Ukrainian, and you may turn on your cameras. And hey, Sophia, do you want to ask or tell us something? You're on mute.
Yeah, I was just about to say hi, and I realized that I turned on the camera and I have this funny background, and I forgot to turn it off. But
so cozy.
Thanks.
Hey, Hannah has joined already. Let's wait for several minutes anyway. Hey, Sophie, why did you turn off your background?
I thought it just would be, distracting from the discussion we're going to be having today. So
you still have a couch on the background.
Yeah, it's just another, yeah, not that one.
The pink one was nice.
Hey, how is everyone?
I'm good and excited to hear some interesting information about research ops.
I believe everybody is for the same reason to find out more about this, because it's when Dasha first told me about that, I was really surprised there is actually a job like that. I've never heard there are possibilities like that even. It would be really interesting to understand what is it about and what your obligations as research op is.
We're going to cover all the things today, for sure.
Okay, so I think that we can start a little bit. So meanwhile, people are joining, and meanwhile, I give some introduction before Hannah will take her microphone. Yeah, so welcome everyone to the meetup of R9 research community. And before we start, let me remind you that we have R9 Facebook page, YouTube, LinkedIn page, and Telegram chat. Let me send you the links to this chat. Here we are. And yeah, please subscribe to be aware of new events. Today, we'll be talking about a new for Ukrainian community profession, research ops. Who are these people? What do they do? How can I become a UX research ops? Does my team need one? So we will try to look for answers with Hannah today. And before we start, I would like to ask you just curiosity, could you please send plus in this chat if you have research ops in your company? That would be really interesting statistics. And you may send minus if you don't have, just to check, yeah. Plus, oh my God. I could work with Hannah. Brooke, hi. Nice to have you here. What is it? Who is it? Okay, that Mark, you're in the right place. So we will find out who is research ops today. Great. So, and now please briefly answer my question like in the chat. What do you think are main responsibilities of research ops? Just a couple of words, maybe, just to focus on the topic of today's meetup. How do you think what they do? How do they help?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear.
I guess it's opportunities. Okay, Mark, you are far away from the truth. So this meetup will be helpful for you, that's for sure. To make sure research projects are clear, communicable, and run smoothly. Okay. Okay, thank you. Great. So anyway, whether you wrote in the chat or just thought about it, just keep in mind, what do you think those people are doing in the company? And then you can compare your assumptions and hypotheses with the reality. Yeah, so And now let me introduce you, Hannah Barbosa, Head of Research Operations at AWS. She will walk you through an introduction to the profession. I'd like to hand it over to Hannah from here. Hannah, please give a word to you.
Awesome. Hey, nice to see everyone. I'm going to go ahead and get set up and share my screen here. Just quick note, I'm going to be dropping off camera so that I can preserve bandwidth. So I invite you all to do the same so that we're not working through some delays. So give me just 1 second and I will get going.
Okay.
Maybe. Just a moment. There's never anything without tech delays, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't see the screen yet.
Okay. Here we go. Coming through. It's just getting set up on my end.
This is the first meetup when we ask people to turn off their cameras, actually. But yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. Anyway,
yeah, just always. All right, so this should come through now. All right, let me know when you all can see.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, awesome. Well, diving right in. Hello, welcome, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, the R9 community, for hosting me. I'm really looking forward to sharing more about research operations, what we do, all that good stuff. Before we dive in, I'll say if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate to chime in or speak up. I won't be able to see the chat, so I welcome. Awesome, yeah. Thank you.
And also, sorry, Hannah, I just wanted to mention that if you are not sure how to formulate maybe your question in English, you may type it in Ukrainian and I will translate for Hannah. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then there's also going to be plenty of time at the end for questions too. So if you want to hold off until the end, that's totally fine. Great. So in terms of what I'm going to be sharing and kind of chatting about today is first and foremost, what is research operations? So I'll provide kind of this 30,000 foot view and dig into the pillars of, what we as a research operations community really think it entails. I'll talk a little bit about why it matters. I think as we talk about what it is, why it matters will be evident, but I do have a little bit of data to share to kind of talk through. And then I'll also talk about how to get started, whether you're hiring or interested in hiring a research operations professional or becoming a research operations professional yourself. I have a few tips and tricks and just things to think through. But before we get into that, just a little bit about me, a little bit about the voice coming through the screen here and how I landed as an operations professional. So I'm Hannah. I'm a researcher turned operations leader. I spend my days developing best-in-class research programs built on operational excellence. I did my best to get every buzzword possible into that short little blurb there. But in terms of my career path and kind of how I got here, so I started on the agency side, focusing on really large scale kind of foundational studies, which I loved. It was awesome. But once I turned over research to my client, I was never really part of the what's next. So I ended up transitioning over to the corporate side so I could be part of that so what, kind of now what conversation, really helping implementing the insights that I was uncovering. So for better or for worse, right? Once I went corporate, I discovered kind of along the way over time that having strong operations and processes and programs in place really allowed me as the researcher to focus on doing great research work and sharing my insights in a meaningful way and really landing that work. So as I said, it was a long and sort of painful process. And so I sort of set out to bring that joy to others. I joined Amazon to basically build research programs and teams, actually joined to lead a democratized research process, pivoted back into solo research and research management at Amazon, and then transitioned over to AWS to lead the operations team. I currently have a team of 6 operations professionals that I manage, including myself, and we support the largest centralized research organization at Amazon. So that's a little bit about me and how I came into research operations. So digging into what is it, how would we ultimately define it? I pulled this quote from the research ops community. I'll chat a little bit about them later and share them as a resource, but I think they really sum it up well here. So research operations is the people, mechanisms, strategies that set user research in motion. It provides the roles, tools, processes needed to support researchers in delivering and scaling the impact of the craft across an organization. So simply put, I like to think of research operations as everything that kind of allows research to go, that helps it happen, that kind of, as it says here, sets in motion. So as a community, as a research ops community, we tend to think of like pillars of the specific work that it involves. Before I kind of dig into each pillar and share a little bit more about some of the specifics, I will say there is definitely discussion in terms of like how many pillars are there and what kind of makes sense. So the research ops community that I just referenced, they actually have 8 pillars. My team at AWS, we actually have 4. So we kind of combine some of these. So I landed on 6 here to share with you all. I thought it would be great to just kind of go through these 6. And then as we go through them, I encourage you to just sort of think through what makes the most sense for your team, for your organization. How would you kind of combine or expand these pillars to suit your needs? So, whoops. Okay, there we go. And the screen's still coming through? Everything's good?
Yep. Everything.
Okay, awesome. Awesome. Okay. So the first 2 here, participant management and tools and infrastructure. So I started with these 2 because I think from my perspective, these are usually the 2 that people think of most often when they think of research operations. So kicking it off here with participant management, research operations can really support and lead all of that work that has to do with sourcing and screening participants, all of the back and forth with scheduling and rescheduling and managing communications, as well as, distributing incentives and managing a panel, whether you have your own panel or maybe you work with a vendor or a partner to manage a panel. So I think as an audience, a lot of individuals tend to think of participant management as very tactical work. And it is very tactical, but there's also a lot of great opportunities to be strategic here in terms of setting up best practices, looking for efficiencies in recruiting, and building out a panel itself, right? That's a very strategic initiative. The second most common here is tools and infrastructure. And you might hear me slip up and say tools and vendors instead of infrastructure. Tools and vendors are a very big part of my life. But this sort of pillar really involves everything from researching and vetting and screening potential tool and vendor partners. So really assessing whether or not they're a good fit for the organization, negotiating contracts, and then ultimately onboarding these tools and vendors into your organization, whatever that might look like for you. But of course, because all these tools and vendors are run by individual humans, regardless of the brand or the software, there's also a relationship management aspect of it. So for example, my team and I spend a lot of time monthly meeting with our different tools and vendors to ensure that we're working well together and that we're meeting our researchers' needs. So tools and vendors is a pretty heavy lift. There's also the aspect of your labs and equipment. So maybe you and your team have a lab itself, maybe you outsource labs or facilities, but regardless, if you've worked with a researcher, you've conducted any type of in-person work, there's also equipment involved, right? So procuring the right equipment, making sure it works, making sure everyone has the right batteries and that things are charged when they're checked out, a lot of very tactical stuff, but also working with researchers to make sure that you have the right items in stock. So tools and infrastructure is another really big piece. So the next two pillars here are knowledge management and governance. So knowledge management includes what I would say is an infamous research and insights library. I think there's quite a large discussion in the research community about how do we store insights, how do we help people get access to reports, and how do we communicate data so we're not repeating the same research. So research operations can be a really strong partner for either building and managing the system that insights live within. They can also help establish templates or frameworks for collecting data, collecting information, making sure that researchers have the best practices that they need in place when creating reports. So for example, your organization might have branding guidelines in place or best practices when you're creating a video. Do you need to include subtitles? Does any of the font need to be, or it needs to be a specific font, needs to be a specific color, right? Research operations can really help define some of those and build out consistency. I'll touch on this a little bit later, but I think knowledge management, from my perspective, also includes some of those mechanisms for sharing insights, whether that be sort of, I was thinking very specifically like creating the mechanisms like the Slack channels and helping people communicate their insights broadly, maybe via like a newsletter or whatever it might be. So knowledge management really falls within that. Governance is another really big place. So if you've ever tried to launch a research project or onboard a vendor, you're probably very familiar, maybe painfully so, with legal, finance, and security. So research operations, I like to think of my team as having very strong partnerships with these three departments in our organization. We consider ourselves to be the people who have the answers to all the questions when it comes to compliance and NDAs and making sure that we're just operating our research practice in the most ethical way and in the way that's best for our participants in our organization. If we don't have an answer, we like to think of ourselves as having strong partnerships and, again, relationships with the legal, finance, and security people. So as you all know, PII is very important. There's a lot of new laws and regulations around things. GDPR, I'm sure you're familiar with. And so research operations can really help make sure that there's consistency across the organization in terms of how we approach those things and ensuring that we're doing it in the right way. So some other work there. And the final two pillars that I wanted to share with you all, advocacy and competency. So again, touched on advocacy a little bit when I talked about knowledge management, but really this is about sort of marketing and communication efforts, right? So not just like the insights or the reports themselves, but also the function of research overall. So how are we demonstrating the value and the impact of the work that the team is doing? A couple ways I wanted to share that my team is doing this is we're leading monthly business reviews. So that's a document that we create that we're sharing with our leadership and our leadership's peer group to really highlight the work that we're doing and then also provide a lot of details in terms of specific projects if people are interested. Another way that my team is helping to kind of advocate for what we're doing is tracking research project metrics. So literally looking at data points for each research project and aggregating that information across our team to be able to point to and say, we conducted this many studies this quarter, or we spoke to this many participants. Really just to elevate and bring awareness to like, hey, we're doing a lot of things and here's who we're working with and how it's impacting the org at the team level. So I think of advocacy as like, how are we advocating for research in and of itself within our organization? There's also an aspect, outside of the organization within the greater research community. And then I think there's also an aspect within our team individually. So research operations really helps drive alignment across researchers with the mission, the vision, the goals, and helping researchers bring those things to life through their roadmaps, their own individual, personal, and professional goals as well. And the last piece here is competency. So researcher onboarding, right? How are we setting our researchers up for success the day that they join? How are we making sure that they know where to go, what tools they need access to, how we operate as a team? There's always room for improvement and learning on that one. But I think it's an important component of competency. There's also individual and team upskilling. So I mentioned the research project metrics that my team is sort of tracking and obtaining. We're actually using that data and that information to determine where there might be outages in our tool set or opportunities for training and development. For example, if our most common methodology is surveys, is that because we have an outage or a need for a new qualitative tool or whatever it might be? Competency also leans itself towards like mentorship and career development. Many people kind of break that out to be its own pillar. So again, I invite you to think about what makes most sense for your organization. But given that research operations is so well connected in helping kind of make the research function go, they can also really support and stand up like mentorship programs and drive career development processes as well. So those are the 6 pillars that I want to share with you today. Again, I encourage you to think about what makes sense for your organization. But if understanding all the different pieces and parts that research operations touches wasn't enough, I do have some data to talk about why research operations matters. Diving in. It's just me and my voice here. So I hope people are still out there.
Yes, thank you. I'm just writing the questions for myself. So yeah, hopefully everybody does.
Yeah, of course. So a little bit of data to share here. So UX is growing, right? And so I say UX here because research operations and research is part of UX. So if we think about like why research operations matters, we have to think about like, okay, the ecosystem that it fits into is growing, is expanding. So Jacob Nielsen of Nielsen Norman Group, basically in 2017 forecasted that there would be 100 million UX professionals globally by 2050. The theory is that UX really began around 1950, so that the profession's about 100 years old or so. Whether or not we reach that 100 million mark, I leave that up to you in your kind of interpretation. That's up to you. But whether or not we reach that, there are some clear kind of components that are help driving this growth. And they are a bit anecdotal, but I'll share some of the things that I've seen that Nielsen Norman Group has reported on, and that maybe you've seen in your individual teams or careers and communities. So the first piece here is the first component to this growth is investment from companies in their existing UX practices. So you may have seen leadership or your group receiving additional funding, additional headcount. Maybe there's an interest in investing in an internal tool, right? Or bringing on new tools. Also, I think interest in insights and research libraries are a big part of that. So there is this investment in existing UX practices and teams. There is also, we've seen more and more organizations start hiring or building out UX teams and functions. So what's interesting is like throughout the years, I've been interviewing folks. I've been interviewing with a lot of people that are the first researcher in their organization, or they established the research practice, or they advocated for it. So there's just this kind of growth that I think we're seeing where more and more companies are interested in UX and what it means for their organizations and ultimately their customers or end users. And then the third kind of component here is that UX is expanding into more countries. So whereas maybe it might have been some job functions that were common in the US or Canada, it's now expanding globally and even broader. So kind of simply put, UX is growing, the demand and the interest for UX is growing, and the buy-in is there. So yeah. Another piece about why research operations matters is really kind of tying it directly to the researchers. So kind of digging into this chart and what I'm showing here, there's an organization called User Interviews. They are a vendor and a tool. They conduct full service. They do recruiting. They have a panel software. But one of the things that they also do is they research our industry and our, the research function. And they have a report that they put out called The State of User Research. They've been doing it for the last 4 years. And so this data is pulled from the 2022 version that they ran. So basically, if you think about research operations and why it matters, again, tying it to the researchers and researchers' job satisfaction, what they did, or what User Interviews did here, was look at all the different components that researchers evaluate in terms of like thinking about satisfaction of their jobs. So they're looking at things like org structure, tool stack, or toolkit, whatever you might call that, and seeing how these impact their job satisfaction. So this data here really is just demonstrating like level of dissatisfaction with those aspects. But I think what's most important in kind of tying that back in is researchers with a dedicated operations teammate or team are more satisfied with their jobs. So on a 1 to 5 scale, researchers with a dedicated ops person rate their job satisfaction at 4.1 out of 5, compared to those without rate their job satisfaction at a 3.5 out of 5. So if not only thinking about all the different ways that a research operations team or individual can help you elevate your research practice, it also matters for the individual researchers on your team and helping them reach like a certain level of job satisfaction, hopefully leading to things like retention and, just continued excitement and investment in the organization. So some things to chew on. And so while this is all well and good, I think it's definitely worthwhile to talk about like, okay, how do you get started, right? Sounds like it's something we should be doing. It's something we should be considering. How do I even get started? And I think here is the good news, is that you already have. So whether you are a UX researcher, a coordinator, maybe you're just a human who was asked to lead a research project at some point in time, you have already worked on or have thought about or have touched research operations components. So it's already something that you've thought about. Maybe it's something that you're feeling a lot of pain for right now, but it's already something you're doing. And so I tend to think of 2 kind of paths on how to approach this. The first is that you want to hire a research operations professional. And the second is maybe you want to become a research operations professional. As someone who has been on both of these paths, sometimes at the same time, I offer you kind of a few tips and tricks or just things to consider here. Okay, is it going next? There we go. So for those interested in hiring a research ops professional, first things first, I encourage you to kind of think long-term. So thinking back to the beginning of the presentation where we talked about participant management and tools and infrastructure, and how a lot of that work is really tactical, and they tend to have a very immediate need, or research teams tend to have a very immediate need to address that pain, right? Those specific tasks and tactical work. But I encourage you to think again, after seeing everything that research operations can impact or touch, think about how what your team's 3-year plan is, what your goals look like, and how an operations professional can really help you get there, maybe get there faster, maybe go further, or just set the right foundation, right? So if you're feeling an immediate pain right now, I do encourage you to think, what is like the long-term goal? I also encourage you to not wait. So there's a lot of information out there about maybe when your team reaches like 8 to 12 researchers or 8 to 12 like research managers plus researchers or whatever it might be, that's a great time to start thinking about ops. I'd encourage you to maybe not agree with that or think about that a little bit differently. What would it look like if you brought an operations person in sooner rather than later? How could setting the foundation and building strong processes and having the right tools and the right things in place help you scale research across the organization, or help your researchers spend more time focusing on landing the research and conducting that work, right? So what might it look like if you brought someone in sooner versus having to bring someone in to backtrack, clean up some of the things that you need to do, and then start thinking strategically? So just encourage you to think earlier. And also think leveling, right? So research operations can sometimes feel like a service to researchers when really it's an opportunity for a partnership. So part of setting the standard and setting the team up for success in terms of like research operations is a strategic partner to our researchers and our research team is about leveling, right? And leveling the playing field. So I urge you to sort of think about leveling and maybe bringing an ops person in at a similar or same level as some of your researchers. Again, that might look different for each organization. I know every organization is different with leveling and hierarchy and things like that, but just something worth considering. So for those of you who are interested in becoming a research operations professional, I will say that ops professionals come from all walks of life and many different career paths, just like many researchers. But these are some things that I did that helped me move into the practice a little bit more formally. And so first things first is find a mentor. Maybe it's someone who works in program or project management, or maybe someone who works in design operations. Design operations is a little bit more mature than research operations, so it's a bit more of an established practice, and there are some great mentors out there. So I encourage you to find someone that you can just lean on, bounce ideas off, maybe meet with regularly. That was super helpful for me. I also encourage you to research the researchers. So whether you are trying to convert your existing role into a research operations role, or if you're looking for new research operations roles externally, like outside of your current org, it's important to have a body of work to speak to that's relevant. And regardless of where you are in the work you're doing right now, there's opportunity for you to get involved in operations. So if you're the researcher or if you're sitting outside the research team, researchers will be more than happy to share their pain points and their opportunities from an operational perspective. So I encourage you to go out and do some research, stakeholder interviews, whatever it might be, to kind of learn what those needs are and prioritize them. And once they're prioritized, pick one and go after it. Build something, whether it's building a library or a process or a program, or maybe you're just like, you've picked a vendor for the team to work with that you think the team should consider. So once you've identified these opportunities or these needs, just kind of go out there and give it a try. I always say to myself on a regular basis, because I need to hear it more than anyone, done is better than perfect. So I encourage you to just get out there and do something, again, just to add towards that body of work to help sort of, get you there. And then I promised some resources that you can kind of take with you and sort of stay connected in the future. So I did reference all of these references throughout this presentation as well. So the first is the Research Ops community. So they have a website, they have a board, there's a Slack channel that's great. A lot of really great just interaction there. They also have a podcast, and I didn't include it here, but they do have an event every year, a conference that's just dedicated to research operations. Last year it was hybrid, and this year, 2022, it was hybrid. And those that attended virtually, it was free. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Next is the company I mentioned, User Interviews. So they have a blog, they have a podcast called Awkward Silences. And then you can also review that State of User Research report yourself online as well. And then the final sort of resource here, if you're looking for something a little bit more formal, the Nielsen Norman Group is a great research. They have trainings, they have certifications, and they also have articles as well. So with that, thank you all for listening. I would love to stay connected. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have any questions after the fact, please feel free to reach out. Happy to schedule one-on-one time or to just chat, message, whatever kind of works best for you. But with that, I will open it up for questions and come back on camera.
Awesome. Thank you, Hannah. That was really interesting. And I have plenty of questions from my side.
Okay.
But the priority is for community members. And I see that Yuri raised his hand. And yeah, Yuri, please.
Hi, Hannah. Hi,
Yuri.
Anna. I'm happy to see you all here. And by the way, Hannah, thank you for this super insightful presentation. And as a former design operational manager, I have like a very interesting question. So the design operational field, I observed a link between the organization maturity level and the design operational manager's role. So in other words, in other words, I assume that the lower the maturity level, the more design ops is about getting the stuff done instead of then empowering team with processes, tools, and an environment. So in this case, here is my question. Like, I never heard about the research operational field before, and I never dug deep into this field. So my question is about like, have you ever observed such links between the level of research maturity and the research operational role?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of discussion about what level of maturity your organization might need to reach to be willing to invest in research operations, particularly from like a headcount and a funding perspective. So I agree, it's that same case. Design operations is definitely, design operations is further along in that maturity than research operations. But I think it sets a really strong precedence for research operations. So absolutely, I have seen that. I think it's interesting too, because we tend to think about research operations being like a new function, right? Maybe 4 or 5 years old. It's actually much, it goes back further than that. So I have some folks on my team who have 20 plus years of experience, but I think it is a maturity piece. And now we're seeing a lot more teams kind of reach that maturity. So yeah, happy to share more.
Thank you, Yuri, for the question. Thank you, Hannah. Does anyone else want to turn on their mics and ask a question? If not, I will ask a question from the chat, and it's something similar from my side. So what tools do you use for sharing knowledge and research findings among different departments within so large company as AWS?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer is we use a lot of tools. We are actually in the process of trying to find kind of the primary tool. I don't know that we will ever find the one tool to serve all of our needs, but we are looking, and we're in the process of either buying or building a tool that really fits for all of us. Right now, every researcher approaches sharing their insights a little bit differently. So some people, and it depends on how they write their reports, right? Some people develop like internal wikis. Some people share out their insights via email. Others are just sort of promoting it in monthly business review documents, having readouts with their teams. So everyone functions a little bit differently right now. So one of the primary things that my team is helping with is trying to bring us all together and create some consistency and try to find a primary tool. So unfortunately, I don't have a this is a tool that you need to get answer. We have found, Yeah, we have heard of Dovetail. It's interesting because I have a demo with them this week. So we've heard great things about them.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Nice. And regarding the monthly business review, I wonder, like you mentioned about metrics that you track for your team or UX researchers. Could you please share which exactly metrics do you track in your organization?
Yeah, and so I think it will depend on what your team is trying to understand. Right now, we're at the point where we're just tracking data points for each project, and we are trying to see what metrics kind of come out of that. But some of the data points are, for example, methodology, like what method are we using, start date and end date, cost of the project, right? Recruitment fees, professional services, total cost. If we use any tools or partner with any vendors, we're tracking impact a little bit. I think that's a larger conversation, but we're tracking very tactical things like, did you write a report? Did you share that report? How did you share it? But over time, we're hoping to see things like, hey, this service had this many studies conducted over the last year. How did that impact their service or whatever it might be? So yeah, just a few of those things. I think over time, we'll get to a point where we'll be able to say things like this methodology takes this amount of time on our team, or recruitment for this service is challenging. And we can see that based on the amount of time it takes or the number of dropouts that we had in the study. So yeah, it's it's not a perfect process. It's definitely something where we are just starting and we are modifying it as we're going.
You're a lot of, like, you're ahead of us at least, so you at least have some metrics. So that's nice to that you share your current situation and inspire myself, for example. Yeah. Also, I just wanted to ask, guys, maybe someone want to turn on camera, microphone, ask a question, or type in the chat. No? Okay, so regarding legal, I see a raised hand. Andre?
Yeah, hi. So, Anna, thanks a lot for the talk. So my question would be, so research operations consists of a number of different components, which we briefly talked through, like processes, tools, and many others. So my question would be, based on like your experience, would be really interesting to hear, like, how would you establish a research operation, let's say in a new organization, on what things you would focus like from the start, because you don't have all the resources, like, because there's a lot of layers, you cannot start doing everything. What would be the crucial, I don't know, first, I don't know, 3 of them or something? Can you start with just processes and ignore tools and everything else? Or what would be like those baby steps to start?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I would start with, as you're looking at the different priorities and opportunities and things like that, I would start with anything that is going to prevent research from happening. So if recruitment is really challenging and you're not able to recruit participants, then you can't conduct research. If you don't have the right tools in place and that's preventing you or blocking you from conducting research, I would start with like, what things have the ability to stop research? And that might look different in your organization, and then prioritize from there. Once you work through those roadblocks, I think then you can start thinking a little bit more like, it would be nice to have this process in place, but I would definitely prioritize, especially as you're looking to establish an operations function. You can demonstrate immediate impact by showing how you're helping research continue to happen and removing roadblocks for those researchers. That would be my suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Andre. Does anyone else want to ask a question? Not yet. Okay, so regarding legal, responsibilities to communicate with legal and some difficult stuff. Does a person to like be aware of, I don't know, some additional information to get some additional education in legal field to I don't know, to deal with this?
Yeah, I have found that you don't necessarily need to do any sort of like legal education or anything like that. But there's definitely some things you need to learn about or research on yourself. So for example, for me personally, understanding security and security protocols and what that means and how it connects with legal has been a journey. And actually there's some, AWS has some internal resources where I'm able to like learn and understand that better. So I'd say you don't have to. It might depend on how complex and how strict your organizations are with compliance, or maybe it also depends, I think, on the type of research that you're doing and information you're collecting. So I don't think you have to be like a SME in it. Like you don't need to be equivalent to your lawyer. But you definitely need to have enough information to be able to audit and push back if you need to redirect the research team in any way. And you also need to know who to go to or where to go to for the answers. That has been critical in keeping things moving forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And I have a question now, we have a question from Brooke.
Yeah.
What is the most important things a researcher should know about how to work effectively with research ops?
Wow. Okay. Brooke, that is not a softball. I think some of the things that that's important in terms of like working with research operations is establishing a partnership and thinking at it and coming at it from like a partnership perspective. Definitely, again, I referenced some of the tasks and things that research operations do. It is very tactical, and those things have to get done and they are important, but it's also important to think of your ops person as like your partner. So I think working through whatever bias you might have and thinking of them in that way is really important. And then I think also just like clear communications of your expectations. So I think it's important to, just like any business or, colleague working relationship, understanding how people communicate and how they receive information is super helpful. And documenting things in a way that makes sense for you all. So I won't continue on that that TED Talk. I'll leave that there.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question from Irina. When you're hiring research ops specialist, what skills or traits are crucial? And I want to add here from my side, like how do you interview people? Do you give like a test, some task to see how a person deals with some challenges or how the process goes? Maybe you have some tips and tricks.
Yeah. So Amazon has a pretty kind of clear interview process in terms of like number of interviews and how they anchor their questions and that sort of things. But something that I've seen that's been helpful in speaking with operations people is, it is helpful to see a portfolio. So again, talking about that body of work and establishing that body of work. So I think seeing a portfolio, certainly don't need to share anything proprietary, but talking about how you worked with teammates or whatever it might be to establish processes or think about things, I think that helps. For the specific skills, it kind of depends. So I talked about how my team really focuses on 4 pillars, and the pillars are really important for us because that is the foundation of how we resource, including headcount. And so depending on which pillar I'm hiring for might depend on some of the skills that I'm looking for. So for example, if I'm hiring a panel manager, I might be really looking for someone who is super detail oriented, or who maybe has had experience in establishing CRMs or something like that in the past. So in general, I think though, for your research operations folks, you're looking for someone like with similar skill sets to program management or project management, but I'm a big believer in skills being super transferable. And as I said, a lot of people come from non-traditional research backgrounds. We talk about like librarians joining research operations teams to lead the knowledge management pillar. So it just depends, I think, on the role, the specific role you're hiring for.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have another question from Zion Tai. Sorry for misspelling maybe your name. Hey, Hannah, thank you so much for your time. I'm currently an UXR of one at my startup. And sometimes find myself having to do both the jobs of UXR and research ops. Do you have any advice in terms of how to balance and how to further develop the skills of a research ops with limited resources? Thank you.
Yeah, that's tough. And I think that's what we see primarily, right? Researchers are managing research operations in addition to their research work. I would say two things. So identify the operations pieces that are going to prevent you from moving forward with your research work and prioritize those. And then also potentially look for partners within the organization. So for example, we have some teammates that focus just on tools and bringing tools on board, right? And vetting them and managing the contract process and all that. And so while that is something that research operations can do, it's interesting because we've actually partnered with individuals in our organization to help make that happen. So I would say maybe look and see who else is in your organization or startup and what skill sets they have. And if they also have any aspirations or goals, professional development around some of your operational needs. Like, you never know, right? Maybe someone who's in project management wants to move towards program management, and working with you to establish a program could help them do that. Also, if you have any budget or opportunity to outsource, that can sometimes be an avenue, just in terms of if you need to conduct, like, for example, evaluative studies, and you want to stand up like a lab with a vendor or a partner, but you don't have time to do that yourself, that can always be a good opportunity there too. So really three things.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask you about like how to kind of sell the idea to leadership that we need to hire research ops. Like, how do you suggest to add value to this role in the team? Because eventually everyone from a research UX researchers team take the role of UX a little bit, like somebody manage some libraries, somebody hire participants and establish the process. And so how do you suggest to sell it within the organization, the new role?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really tough. I don't have a perfect answer for that. I will say, as I've been moving through my career and moving towards like an operations role, I've really been looking for leadership that believes in UX, believes in research, and believes in operations. So like, I personally have been looking for leaders that know the value of operations, maybe not research operations, but operations as a whole. I think that's really helpful. So if there are ways that you can help sort of educate or up-level your leadership to think about like operations and the value of ops as a whole, I think that's important. And then I think it also just comes back to proving out the work and kind of doing the things, right? Establishing the processes and demonstrating, like, you know, if I was able to partner with an ops person to conduct, you know, all the recruitment and screening and scheduling, that shortens my timeline by X amount, and just kind of put together some numbers and see what it might look like for you. So I think that's where tracking like your project data really helps serve you. Over time, you're able to see where you can build in efficiencies and how you could justify an ops specific role. I also think that in some ways it's just going to take time too, right? Like design operations has really taken off. I think research operations is next. And so as there's more and more excitement about research, there will be more and more excitement about research operations. So, and I say this as someone who went to leadership and presented this whole case, and leadership at a different organization, not at AWS, was like, no, sorry, check back later. So I did. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we have to wait. Okay, that's also an option. We have two more questions. Oh, and we have a raised hand. Sophia, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, it's just really related to what you're talking right now. At what point do you think a team of researchers actually need the research ops? Like from your experience or maybe what you observed in other teams? I'm just super curious because I'm working in a pretty small team of 2 people. And it's interesting at what point of time you are having that scope of work that you need a separate person for that.
And just sorry, and you have Sophia has not only her team with 2 people, but within her organization there are other teams of UX researchers, but they working on separate projects, products even. So maybe it makes sense to have one research ops who can serve all of the teams.
Yeah, and we like our research ops team serves like multiple different researchers who support multiple different services. So in terms of timing, it's interesting. A lot of the information out there will say like around the 8 researcher mark is where you need to kind of start thinking about an ops person. I was just recently having some conversations with people that were like, actually, if you bring on 1 researcher and 1 ops person, like think about what you could do then, right? Because you're establishing processes and you're letting the researcher run and conduct this great work and land their insights while this other person is thinking about all the logistics and everything around it. So I'd say like community as a whole probably suggests somewhere between 8 and 12, just based on some recent conversations that I've had with peers in the field. That's why I said I might consider doing something earlier. I think it also depends on the type of research you're doing. It might depend on like the level of support that you need. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. So while nobody is raising their hands, I will ask the next question from the chat. So Yulia is asking, is there a research panel in your company? If yes, how do you invite participants to be a part of it?
Yeah, so there's a few different research panels. We actually don't manage one, so we just partner with other teams who have them. But recruitment is very specific in terms of inviting people, and I'd say each organization has like strict like legal processes. So I would encourage you to work with your legal team to understand ways that you can and cannot recruit. For example, like, can you run ads on social media? Can you recruit people at events? There are agencies out there where you can hire people to help you source recruitment or source participants. I haven't seen that be super effective, but there's a lot of different ways to recruit people into your panel. Friends and family recruit is always big. Referrals are great. But I would definitely encourage you to work with your legal team. I have seen people recruit like out on the street, right? And I have also seen people have to recruit in very formalized, structured ways. So,
thank you. And the last question I see in the chat. Any recommended readings from your side on the ops topic?
Yeah, I would say definitely, and it's not like a book specifically, right? I would say get into like the research ops community and also user interviews blog and look at that information. I feel like that's been super helpful. It's very digestible, and it's great to kind of just see what's happening. I think it's also the most up to date. Again, because I think we are like a pretty new, a newer function, right? A newer part of research. I don't know that there are like tons of books out there about it. There's definitely tons of books out there about research, right? Just enough research, all that good stuff. But I encourage you to check out like the blogs and listen to the podcasts and things. That seems to be where the community is. And definitely if you can join the Slack channel for research ops community, there's just a lot of great conversation going on there too. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Hannah. Does anyone else want to ask a question? Last call. No, it seems like we're done. So thank you so much. It was really inspiring and interesting meetup and conversation. Yeah, hope to see you soon on our other meetups maybe. And you mentioned about that speech.
I'm sorry?
Do you want to make a speech, like public speech somewhere else, like on conference or something? No? Maybe
I don't have anything else. Maybe in the future. I don't have anything else planned. But if anyone would like to get connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out. I would love to stay connected and just continue the conversation. So thank you all for having me. Thank you for your awesome questions. If you have any more specific individual questions, would love to connect. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.